Well, Joe, hey, congratulations for the documentary Ending Disease.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, so tell us what actually sparked you to create this nice emotional documentary.
Well, so 20 years ago, about President Bush outlawed most stem cell research. And about 5 years, and then 16 years ago, the people of California passed a proposition that devoted $3 billion to stem cell research. And that was put on the ballot by people who had parents who had kids that had type 1 diabetes and kids that had parents that had Alzheimer's. And so about 5 years ago, I started thinking, I wonder how successful this has been in creating any cures for debilitating diseases as they had promised when they got it on the ballot. So I started looking into that, and I followed first a number of scientists who were looking for cures to a number of diseases. And I would tell them all, I'd really like to follow your clinical trial in progress. And they all told me, no, you'll never be able to do that. There's always either a university, there's a pharmaceutical company, and a hospital, and all three of them are going to be a little skittish, so I don't think you'll ever be able to do that. And then one of the scientists who owned his therapy, he met with me and he said, sure, here, contact this person. And that's Rosie, the woman who's blind from retinitis pigmentosa. And I contacted her and said, I'd like to follow you. And she said, fine. And I made a trailer from following her for about 6 months. And when the other scientists, and I guess their universities and the pharmaceutical companies or whoever saw it, they wanted me to follow theirs as well, until I was following 10 different clinical trials in progress for brain cancer, breast cancer, leukemia, lymphoma, HIV, spinal cord injury, retinitis pigmentosa, and SCID, or babies born without an immune system. And the results were really amazing. Everything wasn't a home run, but many of the diseases had great results from following these clinical trials, and other ones had significant results. And so it's an extremely promising field that is going to fundamentally change medicine from treatments over a lifetime to these one-time cures.
It's such a gargantuan task to follow 10 different clinical trials. Did you thought about trying to limit your scope, or did you want to give every trial a chance?
Well, I don't know. As a filmmaker, at first you're happy when you get one trial that you can follow, and then you get another and another, and you never want to say no, because you don't know actually which story is going to be the most compelling. It was an exhausting project because, I'm in a suburb of Los Angeles, but these trials were all over California, and some were in Chicago and Milwaukee as well. And I had to travel to Cincinnati. So I do a type of filmmaking that I call life in progress. Once we pick the subject, in this case, the patient, we want to be there for the significant moments in their life as they unfold. So we want to be there for the big moments, but also we want to be there for subtle moments that reveal, their personality and their relationships. And so to have these 10 trials, I did this over 4 years. So all 10 were not happening at once, thank God. But to be available when, one is having an operation and one is having their CAT scan and one is having their eye exam, and to be there for that, and then also be there for moments with their family when they kind of digest this and kind of put it in perspective. It was exhausting. And then on top of that, I had to raise the funds for it. This was something that I raised the funds from tax-deductible donations through the International Documentary Association. And I spent as much time raising money as I did filming. So That's why I look so tired. I'm actually 25 years old.
You know what? I'm actually amazed that you did all this by yourself, because usually in a task this large, they actually have different teams to follow, different projects. So I'm still astonished how you managed to juggle 10 different projects all at once over 4 years. That's actually quite an accomplishment.
Well, I've been making documentary film and television for 30 years. And most of the time I have been doing productions where they give you a budget. And when they give you a budget, you have a field producer and a production manager and a production supervisor and all this help. But since I'm raising the money, I wanted it to go into shooting and filming. And so I only had a part-time production manager who worked half-time with me. And it was very difficult. On top of that, right when we finished editing, I found out I myself had bladder cancer.
Mm.
And that was a huge shock. But it also gave me the perspective of what these patients are going through, because when you have a disease, you have often a window of opportunity to deal with that. And if it doesn't, and if that cure comes, a year later or 5 years later, then that's just, it can be too late. So it gave me insight into what all these patients are dealing with and how desperate their families are for a cure, and how desperate we are as a society for these cures. And I am doing well. I'm doing very well, actually. And but that was a significant situation. My one son, David, edited this with me, and I was lucky to have him to fill in when this happened. So that was fortunate.
Well, we're glad that you're doing very well. Now, how much convincing for the families, because you tend to film with the emotional elements along with your stories, and some people may be private about that certain stuff. So I understand about the the medical side, saying no, but what about the family stories? Was there any convincing, or they all were very eager to tell their stories?
Well, somewhere in between very eager to tell their stories and feeling very fortunate to have the opportunity to go through these first generation of clinical trials for regenerative medicine. So they felt like they wanted to share it. They might not, some of these people might not be the type of person that normally would be open to having all these aspects of their life shown, but they felt like they had this potentially terminal disease or potentially, life-changing spinal cord injury or HIV or one of these other diseases. And they really wanted people to know about this. And so they were willing to go through it. And then when you work with someone like myself, and I'm a unique filmmaker because most documentary filmmakers don't try to be there for all these events as they unfold. It's just too difficult to set that up. It's almost like a scripted film. They write all these scenes. Mm-hmm. And so you're there for everything that happens, but it's easy. They write it in real life to follow, people's lives and decide you're going to be there at the important moments. It takes a level of cooperation with the patient and their family, and in some cases the scientists, that is, huge. So yes, I would show up at times that were very difficult. I mean, I showed up with the spinal cord injury family when they were about to get the stem cells put into his spinal cord. He's about to go through an operation, and that was 3 weeks after he had broken his neck, and they were still reeling from that. And I give them credit for being able to allow something like this to be a part, a film like this to be a part of that. And then there are other moments where, I wanted to be there when they were being told whether their cancer had come back or not. and that's a scary time. And to, be open to having a film crew there, it's not easy.
As a documentarian yourself, because you have to be there through all those moments, how do you manage to separate your empathy and emotions being in those important, events of their lives?
Well, I think having done this for many, many years, it helps. These are shocking moments that you almost can't, some of them, you just can't imagine having to go through, how hard it is for the family. And you have to be there. And not only do you have to be there, but sometimes you have to ask a question that is, difficult at a difficult moment. And so that's, something that I don't think you're born able to handle. But if you do this sort of thing for 30 years, you develop that. I suppose like doctors who have to talk to patients in all these situations have to develop that. I am very, very emotional. Like, I don't like watching films. I can't watch a scary film, period. I never do. And sad films are very hard for me to watch. I don't enjoy that. But in real life, in these situations, I just find a way to connect with them and try to understand what they're going through and have compassion.
So which family did you have the most connection with you personally?
Well, that's hard to say. I really got close to Rosie, the woman who was blind with retinitis pigmentosa, and her family. They live in Los Angeles, and they have like a really amazing family. She's not only blind, but she says in the film, she became blind because it's progressive around the time that she had her twins, and her twins were born very prematurely, and one of them has huge issues from that. So she also has to raise a handicapped child. And they're a great family. They're just an amazing family. The family where the father had brain cancer, they are a great family, and they have two great kids. And I came very close to that family as well, and other families and individuals in different ways. But I spent a lot of time with those two families, and I don't know. I really like kids, and when you see these families and what they're going through, and how the kids deal with it, and how they have to handle, this family where he had brain cancer, the kids were living with that for their entire lives. And the other kids where Rosie's blind, she calls her kids her C&I children. And they just have a very warm, friendly relationship with their family. And so, I don't know, it is very enriching, although it sounds like it'd be difficult. It is difficult to deal with that, but it's also extremely enriching, and you meet people that have so many parts of their lives that you as an individual can learn from. And if you watch the film, the viewer can learn from them, because these people, including Ryan, who broke his neck and became a quadriplegic, and then got stem cells and is getting back the use of his arms and his hands. That young guy is just so inspiring in the attitude he has. I mean, he's teaching all of us, including his parents, how to deal with this. And so it's moving and enriching.
I happen to agree, and it was also sad that not everybody had a happy ending, through those 4 hours of a documentary for yourself. So now in terms of footage, you must have gathered hundreds and thousands of hours of footage. How did you manage to decide to pare that down into a 4-part documentary? That must have been a very difficult task.
Well, that is time consuming and key to making a documentary. We always shoot a ton. And when you do what I call life in progress, you're committed filmmaking. You're committed to show up and be with the patient or the subject at many times in their lives. Hopefully you're there for the important moments, but you don't always know what is the most important moment. And you want to be there whenever there's a chance of something nuanced or moving to happen, where you can get insight into this subject. So you do shoot many times when, it doesn't end up getting into the film. And the way I do this, having done this for, as I say, almost 30 years, is I grade the scene at the time. And so we have hundreds of hours, and I title it, I describe it, and I grade it at the time so that you can somehow have a sense of what gets in. And it takes a long time to edit a film like this, over 6 months to do this. And as I said, I worked with my son David on this, and he did an amazing job, and we both were editing together.
So throughout this entire process, as you're witnessing, these clinical trials, do you see all of this as sort of like scientific progress, or do you see them as scientific miracles?
Well, somewhere in between those two. It's certainly scientific progress. And I guess the word miracle has like a religious connotation to it. Many of the people who are in these trials come from families that are very Catholic and have questions in their mind when they become a part of this trial, whether stem cell research is okay, because they've heard that there's some question in the Catholic Church. And so it's interesting. Some of them, feel that there is the hand of God in this, that, it's not just science. I try to not get into, in this film, any of the religious arguments around it. I think people can come to their own conclusions, and I feel it's best to show these families, show what they're up against when your eyesight's on the line, when your ability to move your body's on the line, when your life is on the line from cancer. Show what the families are going through, and show what the science offers, and let people draw their own conclusions. So I guess I would call some of this a miracle personally, but it's definitely a fundamental change in medicine, where we're going from lifetimes of treating diseases to one-time cures. And when I started this, there was like 40 different clinical trials in progress, and we followed about 10 of them. And now there's 90 clinical trials for stem cell, CAR T cell, and regenerative medicine. And the vast majority of those are not available for the public now, but within the next 2 or 5 years, they're going to start being available, and it's going to change lives on a huge scale. And it's amazing. And when you see the people as they're going through it and you know them, it's just overwhelming.
So you are certainly astonished the fact that since President Bush, we had three presidencies, with another one coming up soon. Stem cell research has changed so much, especially the fact that it was on the ballot again in California and approved. So this here is looks like stem cell research is here to stay, right?
Well, not only is it here to stay, I was very much watching the new ballot measure that just passed, but it passed by like 2 percentage points, like 49 to 51. And that was for $5.5 billion. So now there are 90 different clinical trials in progress to cure diseases. Of course, they won't all, be a home run, because some of these changes happen incrementally, but some of them do surprise you and just absolutely turn out to be a cure. And this 5.5 billion is really going to finish this. And I guess finish is not the word, because medicine is never finished, but by the end of another decade or 15 years, I don't think people will recognize the medicine we follow now. It will seem so primitive, with chemo and radiation and operations. It'll be just a totally different world where they're using your own cells to cure your disease. And I'm not the best at explaining it. You have to watch the film to get a better explanation, but it is a fundamental difference in medicine that is going to be both cheaper, vastly cheaper in the long run, not in the short run, and also curative. So very encouraging.
Excellent, Joe. Well, let me start wrapping things up with you because it seems like you always like to take these large projects. So what's up next for you now?
Well, as I was working on this film, I was also working on another film on climate change, which is called The Race to Save the World. And if you've heard of Greta from Sweden, she became very well known because she, wouldn't budge, and she called these strikes and whatnot. I followed people who are like the Greta Thunbergs of the United States. I felt that many climate change films were so depressing because they outlined, all the problems that we're going to be faced with. And I thought it would be more encouraging and uplifting to follow people that were doing everything they could and just follow their struggle to try to do everything they could. And so that is finished now, and it's going to come out next year. So I'm curious about that.
Sounds great. Well, one last question. When people do watch your documentary, 4-part documentary, Ending Disease, what's the one most important lesson that you hope that they would take away?
Well, I did my last film on people. It was called American Winter. It was on HBO, and it was about people falling out of the middle class into poverty. And it was very controversial about whether we should help these people. If you remember that time, what was it, 10 years ago, they said they bailed out all the companies, the banks and whatnot. But then when it came to helping the people, it was like, we don't have the budget for that. We can't go into a deficit. And so it was very controversial. And I knew all those families personally, whether we were going to help them or not, and they were all struggling so mightily to survive and to just eat, get food or whatnot. So in this case, you see the progress that's being made. You see how huge a difference it's going to make in the lives of millions of people who are struggling with diseases. As someone who ended up with cancer during this project, I understand that so personally. You really want people to think long and hard about, is this something we want to support as a society? Because if we do, we can make tremendous progress very quickly. Or do we want to argue about this and keep, throwing up roadblocks that will keep these therapies from moving forward?
Excellent answer, Joe. It's something for us to think about. Well, hey, Joe, thank you very much for speaking with me. I find your documentary very emotional, very enlightening, and very educational. So I certainly hope everyone will check out your 4-part documentary, Ending Disease, this week.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Not a problem. Hey, thank you. Bye now. Next time.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.